Your Honor, I request that young Yizhang be beheaded. In the face of the minister's anger, I'm not surprised. I realize it's all just impotent rage. It's because I'm a favorite of the emperor, and just a few days ago, any eunuch could have stepped on me. However, I always feel that this official doesn't seem to be the same as before. There was always a clear stupidity in his eyes. This phenomenon appeared after he fell into the well at Myeongdu Palace. He always jumped into the well by himself. I couldn't help but be curious. I jumped into the well too. I found a round object down there. It was made of steel. I looked at it under the oil lamp. I found it. The People's Republic. Republic. The words People's Republic on top of it. There are five pointed stars. There's also a pattern of wheat ears. I think I've seen this round object before in the imperial court. Are the stars in the sky to help our Song dynasty? Nowadays, Song dynasty, since Jin soldiers invaded south, a lot of land north of the Yellow River has fallen. The two saints hunted in the north. There have been rebellions all over the country. The Song dynasty is in fact on the brink of extinction. The fear of losing the country is not a falsehood. At this time, it's more important to have a revitalized ruler to revitalize China. However, at this time of crisis, since his ascension to the throne in Nanjing, he has fled south. He's thinking of settling down in Jiangnan. So I'm inclined to think that he is the one who came down from the sky, the future ruler of Song dynasty. That night, when I heard that the emperor didn't want to go down to Jiangnan again, he wanted to stay in the central plains to fight against Jin, I felt a little bit of excitement in my heart. So I took the initiative to go back to China. I told him about the way to break the siege. That is the essence of the Song system. The government is also very smart. He brought in Liu Yan, the general of the Red Hearts. Now the government has confidence in his heart. So on the next day, he couldn't wait to recall Mr. Li. Unsurprisingly, the first one to oppose it was Ban Kangxiu. Minister Li has just been dismissed. How can he change his position so quickly? Chancellor Huang Qianshang then chimed in. I'm glad you're aware of this. There's no such rule in this dynasty. With his life protected, he won't stop there. Instead, he'll make an advance by retreating. He turned his attention to Zhongzai's grandfather. Prime Minister Wang Boyan couldn't stand it any longer. He said he couldn't let the emperor be trapped again. With the initiative in his hands, the government finally revealed his ultimate goal. He issued a decree. All civil and military officials, regardless of rank, anyone with an official position, may submit a letter to discuss matters. To discuss the defense of the Central Plains, several officials were in a state of confusion. They looked at each other, but they finally bowed down and gave their orders, and Mr. Zhao didn't make much of it. He went straight to the back to rest after all the trouble last night. He didn't really rest properly, not to mention how refreshed Zhao was after this wave of recklessness. On the other hand, 5 of the most powerful officials in the line turned out of the back of the hall. They each went their own way, but after a quarter of an hour, they met again in a room in the middle hall of Myeongdu Palace. This place, the Privy Council, is temporarily occupied. The Song court system, the internal and external handover of important documents takes place in the Privy Council. That's why when the emperor was in trouble, the 5 of them used to meet here. Mr. Kang, what's wrong with you? Kang Shui didn't say a word. He just stared at me. It's not the right time for a confrontation. I bowed my head and replied respectfully, but I reported last night's events and the officials' trip in detail. I gave a detailed report to the officials without hiding anything, but I didn't tell them that I turned against them in the morning. Faced with such a difficult situation, Kang Siu gave his bottom line after a moment's thought. That's to lead him to Yangzhou safely. We're thousands of miles away. There's no need to worry about the Jin army. He won't care about what these thieves are saying when the time comes. We'll let him live in peace. Then everything will be fine. Next, we have to let him know most of the civil and military personnel will go to Yangzhou. This time, we just need to sift through the papers. Then we need to carefully advise those who may be talking nonsense. It can be done now, however. I whispered all this to the emperor. At the meeting held the next day, Mr. Kang and Mr. Zhao both looked like they had it all figured out, but they didn't realize they were just sparrows pecking at each other. They met at the back of the palace. Kang Shui and young Yizhang were with them. The salute is complete and the greeting is over. There was no fuss. Then, naturally, Liu Hofen, as the Minister of Xiaizing Hall, as the Minister of Military Affairs, and the Right Minister of the Ministry of Defense. But it started with some nonsense. You must know this gossip may seem boring. In fact, it's necessary. Since Mr. Zhao fell into the well, he's been recuperating from his injuries. He's had little contact with foreign ministers, and this sudden request to discuss the defense of the Central Plains. There are rumors that he's forgotten some personnel due to his head injury. So Liu Haowen's trip is a political mission to observe the officials' health on behalf of foreign ministers. Mr. Zhao needs to get in touch with foreign ministers to regain power, and the foreign ministers need to verify the legitimacy of the emperor. In this situation, we can't really count on a Song Huidi. Of course, if it turns out to be Emperor Song Huidi, I can't help it. But fortunately, Mr. Zhao's speech is clear. His speech is smooth, and his demeanor is calm. The two sides made some small talk, not to mention the others in the back room. Mr. Liu is completely relieved. This official is really not stupid, and at this time Zhao also just realized some of Liu Haowen's details, such as this person's Taoism is not the Tao of this Mingdao Palace, rather it's the famous Confucian way of Taoism in history. Moreover, this Liu Haowen is from a famous family. His uncle Liu Manxing, his great-grandfather Liu Yijian, his grandfather Liu Gongxiu, they were all prime ministers at the same time. Zhao also understood why Kang Shui recommended this man to meet him. It's because he resigned from his position as right minister. It was due to Li Gang's crackdown on the exiled ministers in Tokyo. He was involved in Shang Bangchang's fake dynasty in Bianyang. He participated in Zhang Bangchang's fake dynasty, but he was also the first one to persuade Zhang Banchang to return the throne. But it's obvious, this Taoist teacher is far from Zhao Zhou's impression of Taoist teachers. He is gentle and elegant. He answered all the questions, but he did not take the opportunity to attack Li Gang, nor did he talk much about the politics of Huang and Wang. Just like the words in his speech, he advised Zhao Zhou to do everything according to his ability. Through this, Zhao Zhou also more or less again knows some hidden information. I see that many people say that there are no soldiers in the north. The fact is, there are soldiers, but most of them are in chaos. In fact, there are soldiers, but most of them are soldiers and militia. Even if they are recruited, they can't be used to fight the Jins. Liu Haowen is frank. The people of Hebei have been poisoned by the Jin. Most of them want to fight, but they don't have weapons or armor. That's why they can only rely on the mountains and the fields. The central plains are full of rebel armies. They have the numbers and the armor, but most of them are soldiers who fell from the Jin's front. They didn't dare to fight against the Jin. Instead, they could only cause trouble in the local area. If not for that, with Li Boji's courage, I wouldn't have let you go to Nanyan. He wants to link up with the northwest from there and bring the 200,000 western troops into our hands. I understand. Zhao Zhou sighed slightly. This is very similar to what he knows. This should be the truth. If we really want to fight the Jin dynasty, we'll need money from Jiangnan and Bashu. Secondly, we need troops from the northwest. Third, we need to slowly restore morale everywhere. Is that what you mean? Yes, you advised me to go to Yangzhou because it's the starting point of the canal. It's a node for the transportation of wealth from the southeast. We need to use it as a base to build up a slow and steady program. Yes, but if I go south, how can I defend the central plains? I'll use Song to guard Tokyo and send another general to Taishan and Ishui. If the main force of the Jin army suddenly attack, can they hold it? Zhao Zhou raised his eyebrows slightly. Facing the practical difficulties, he no longer has the petty complacency of last night. I know Zhao Zhou slightly adjusted his mind, barely managed to keep his face as normal. That if the Gold Army abandoned the to disregard directly from Nanjing Gobuzhou, what if they go all the way south to attack Xinyan? The river is defended, waiting for reinforcements from all sides, and Tokyo and Shandong are sandwiched between them. What if we can't defend the Huai River and can't rely on Shantung and Tokyo? Abandon Yangzhou, go south and defend the Yangtze. What if the Yangtze River cannot be defended? Liu Haowen is silent again. I understand. Zhao Zhou sighed slightly. There's something I need to tell you. I fell into a well before, although my body is fine. But in fact, I've forgotten some things in my illness. That's why there's a lot of unrest in the city. So Liu Qing will not go to Xianzhou. You'll be reinstated as right minister. You can stay here for counseling. I want to use your experience to calm people's mind. Kang Chui, who had been silent, looked up in surprise instinctively. He wanted to intervene, but he suddenly realized that although their positions are similar, they're not his political allies at all, and according to the rules, he, as a chamberlain, is not qualified to speak at this time. Of course, after the storm of the last 2 days, Kang Chui was no longer too harsh on him. Although Liu Haowen is honest, he's a supporter of the southward movement. What else can he do? So, Mr. Kang shut up immediately. He realized why the government was so confident yesterday. It's ridiculous for a minister to try to compete with the government. Mr. Liu, please sit down. Seeing the other side of the orders, Zhao Zhou's heart was greatly relieved. When he looked at another person, he basically lost his mind. Mr. Zhang, I'd like to speak to you in private. He's been standing still for a long time. He's about 30 years old, and he's a royal inspector. The one person that Zhao Zhou never expected. Suddenly, he did something that no one could react to. What's the point of playing in private? When he came back to his senses, he was at a loss. Isn't this a private meeting? Your Majesty, Liu Haowen, who had just sat down, rose immediately. There's a precedent for the Chancellor and the Minister of the Imperial Household to have a private audience, either to impeach the Emperor or to blame the ministers, or recommending key figures. I beg to leave. What's the need for a private meeting? Zhao Zhou has come to his senses. He's on guard, but he's smiling. Not to mention that there are not many people here. Mr. Liu is a proper person. I've heard of Song Qing. It is rumored that you were involved in both of Minister Li's dismissals. Yesterday, your petition was also aimed at convicting Mr. Li. I'm impressed by your strong words. If not, how can I see the face of heaven? You didn't even bring an elephant tablet with you. The young Zhang Jun just held his head high. He said it with an arch of his hand. But that's enough. Your Majesty, I, Zhang Jun, impeach Chancellor Wang Qiansheng, Minister Wang Boyan, and Minister of the Interior Ban Kangxiu for separating internal and external affairs. They're up to no good. I request the recall of Li Gang and Zong Zai. I request that the commanders of the Imperial camp be recalled. Please return to the palace for the time being, so as to calm people's hearts. The hall is silent. Mr. Kang is in state of war. Even Mr. Zhao is dumbfounded. Are there so many smart people? Minister Zhang, when Minister Li was dismissed twice, you were the one who impeached him the most. Kang Chui couldn't hold on any longer. He fell to his knees in the middle of the hall. Only then did Zhao Zhou come to his senses and raised his voice a little bit. That's one thing, and another is another. Your Majesty, I've survived the humiliation of Tokyo. I've come to my own conclusion. First, the Jin people are barbaric, cunning, and repetitive. We must not make peace with them. Second, Hebei and Hedong, the foundation of the country, must not be lightly abandoned. Third, although Jiangnan is rich, once relied on, is bound to be the situation of partial peace. None to Guangzhou to take the northwest strong soldiers and horses control of manpower in the central plains in order to clean up the situation, to re-establish the river and mountain. Your Majesty, if you ask me once, I'll answer once. I'll answer 10 times if you ask 10 times. I will never change course because because of personal grudges. As for today, your majesty has been injured in a well and has forgotten everything. He's been cut off by traitors, and the heir is only a month old. He doesn't even have a title. At this time, after his majesty has dealt with traitors like Huang, Wang, and Kang, if there is any misbehavior, his majesty's authority will be destroyed. It will destabilize people's hearts. His majesty wants to maintain his authority. His majesty wants to maintain his authority. Li Dian, Zhongzhi, and other tough ministers cannot do it. As for Minister Lu, just as his majesty has arranged, your majesty has arranged for him to be a gentleman. He can serve as a deputy for counseling and reassuring the people, but he can't be entrusted to the court at this time of turmoil. Lu Haowen immediately rose and bowed to Zhao Jiu. I don't know if I agree or disagree. Zhao Jiu was at a loss for words. After thinking for half a day, he realized something, but I couldn't help but laugh. You've been talking for half a day. Zhang Qing is actually the first to recognize the crime of isolating Minister Huang and Minister Kang from inside and outside, and then he recalled Minister Li and Mr. Zong. Zhang Jun is still unafraid, but he asked the question, if your majesty doesn't think these people are isolating themselves, given the favor you've shown these old ministers, why are you only asking about this now? Zhao Jiu is speechless. Lu Haowen was shocked. Kang Shui didn't say a word. He just cut out again and again. Even Yang Yizhang, who's standing in the doorway of the palace, has changed color. This is where Zhao Jiu's incompetence as an ordinary student comes into play. If you ask him to share his pain and suffering, he'll put himself down to win people over. If you ask him to learn from the TV show, he'll be able to pull off a little power play. But if you ask him to order a crime, especially if he knows it, the crime of isolating the inside and the outside would be a big offense anywhere. He might even kill someone. When it came to it, he's hesitant. I just fell down a well. The prime ministers have arranged for the guards and soldiers to protect me. They may not have bad intentions with this in mind. Zhao Jiu, instead of covering up for those people, when he suddenly heard this, Kang Xiu, who had been tense for half a day, almost collapsed on the floor. We'll find out if he's evil or not. Your majesty, please summon all the ministers to examine the papers, see if any of the papers have been intercepted by these traitors. If so, they are guilty. If not, then I've taken the liberty of stirring up trouble and slandering the chancellor. Zhao Jiu and Lu Haowen, who wanted to speak, were completely speechless. Kang Shui, on the other hand, was in a state of shock and almost collapsed. There's nothing else. Mr. Zhao, who's new to the song system, may still need time to figure out what's going on here, but the experienced Kang knows. Zhang Jun's final blow is like the final blow in Kuju. It's basically a political death sentence for him and his clique. Even at this stage, the next step is out of Zhao's control. Zhao Jiu has already figured out what's going on, but he remains silent because he started to do further weighing and analyzing in his mind. At this point in time, first, he has to keep Zhang Jun and appoint Zhang Jun, because whether it's speculative or genuine, this is the first serious minister who openly declared his anti-Jin dynasty politics to him. For this reason, he was prepared to tolerate Li Dian's domineering behavior, not to mention a smart man who is good at reading his own mind. Resisting Jin was the main task, the core conflict. Secondly, if Zhang Jun is retained, then it's not good for him to stop this attack launched by Zhang Jun, and in that case, he still has to keep Yang Yizhang by the same token, even if the national hatred is feigned. Yang Yizhang is his personal safety at this time. However, at the same time, Zhao Jiu had to worry about one person, that is, at this time paralyzed on the ground in a dazed Kang Shui. Kang official at this point. It's not just a modern man who doesn't dare to kill. He also had to worry that when he came from the well, he's also worried that when he came from the well, he might have fallen into this man's hands. What is Yang Yizhang's attitude towards him? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that. Zhao Jiu couldn't help but look up at me standing in the door of the temple, but unexpectedly, at this moment, I was also staring at him nervously. The two of them stared at each other for a while. While both sides were still guessing each other's thoughts in silence, Kang Xiu on the ground noticed this scene. He lost his temper. He turned over and cut out everyone. Don't trust Yang Yizhang and Zhang Jun. They're the same kind of people. They appear to be righteous, but they're both just panderers. They're just pretending. They're just pretending. I want you to know that Zhang Jun was a coward in Tokyo. He's too greedy to die when the country is torn apart. He's hiding in the Imperial College, pretending to be dead. Yang Yizhang treats me with respect. He even stood by when I washed my feet. How can we trust such a villain? Zhao Jiu heard this and made up his mind. He waved his hand at me. When I saw the official's clear instructions, I didn't dare to be slow. I went up to Kang Shui, who didn't know what else to say. I'm about to drag him out of the hall. Kang Xiu was being held down. He was almost in tears. He forced himself to kowtow and wail to Mr. Zhao, who was sitting in the hall. Everyone, save me. It's me who's confused. I only asked that I be allowed to serve at my side and no longer dare to be greedy for power. Zhao Jiu opened his mouth to speak, but he held his tongue. Instead, he winked at me again. He wanted me to take him away. Seeing this scene, Kang Shui completely broke down. He didn't plead with Mr. Zhao, who was sitting in the hall. Instead, he tugged on Lu Haowen's coat angle and uttered absurd words. Mr. Lu, it's not that we're isolating ourselves from the outside world, but we are really possessed by some evil spirits. Lu Haowen was dumbfounded. This madman. I can't let anyone know where you're from. In a panic, I pulled out my sword, but the official suddenly stopped me. Let him speak. I'd like to know what happened to me that day. Kang Xiu turned around and hated him, but he was furious. Why don't you dare to tell us now? We saw something in the well that day. It looked like a dog, but not a dog. A civet, but not a civet. They looked down to see it, but the demon disappeared in a flash. But we fell into the well and fell unconscious. When we woke up half a day later, we seemed to be a different person. Mr. Wang and the others said I was blind. I'm the only one who's always with you, but I knew we'd all been replaced by demons. When Zhao Jiu heard this, he sighed. sighed instead. He sighed a long sigh of relief and will be in the heart for a long time to prepare the words lightly thrown out in public, sir. You and I have known each other for so many years. I'm going to Yangzhou to enjoy the wealth and fortune together at your request. I'm a wise man. We are determined to organize our defense and stay in the north to fight against the Jin dynasty. Then I became a civet demon or a dog demon. How could this happen between us? Zhang Jun glanced at Kang Shui coldly. Even LV Haowen looked at him angrily. Kang Shui, are you so heartless? Kang Xiu is terrified, but he can't do anything about it. He can only let go of his hand and let his men follow him. They'll take him down at this moment. I was completely relieved. I looked at Mr. Zhao Zhaoju hesitated for a moment, helplessly raised his hand and said softly, I wanted to leave him alive. I understand what you mean. Without waiting for Kang Shui to say anything else, directly in front of everyone in the middle of the two officers, he plunged a knife into the back of his neck. Blood was spattered all over the palace. However, everyone in the hall except for Zhao Jiu, who was heavily shocked, the rest of them, including Lu Haowen and Zhang Jun, they didn't even show any significance.